Good morning, everybody. It is the Rob from 106.1 Kiss FM here with my tag team partner in podcasting. Look at you, the very fresh-smelling Mr. Jerry Valeri. Did only I see you smelling your pits a second ago?
I'll tell you. So I woke up late today, and I rushed into work, and I forgot to put deodorant on, and so it's like happening to me. But my pheromones are not smelling great.
Dude, I know that smell. I know that Valeri scent. I'm used to it.
It's
Good morning,
my
buddy.
dad used to call it animal magnetism.
Is that what it was?
That's what it is. It's what it is.
Well, okay, so we've got a lot going on today. By the way, I'm having a rough morning too. I wasn't technically late, but I woke up to a flat tire, the first flat tire I've ever had in my entire life.
Now, were you like NASCAR road crew, changing it as fast as you can, or do you call AAA?
Well, I will call AAA. We had a broadcast from a humane society this morning, and Kat doesn't live all that far from me, and she was just about to leave. So I was like, hey, can you swing by and grab me? So it's actually, if it had to happen, I'm glad it was this morning as opposed to a different morning.
Right.
And I would call AAA, yeah, I think, or something like that. So why were you why were you late to work?
Well, because my son and I, he's 6 years old. Yesterday was the last day of school for our school.
Oh,
and
the best day ever.
Last day of school, and we had fun. They went to Dairy Queen for Dad's broadcast, and we partied, and then we took late night. And then the girls went to bed. My wife and my daughter, they went to sleep. And Evan and I had already started watching wrestling a little bit because I was thinking a lot about my favorite feuds. And I was talking about it, and nobody cared. And Evan was asking me about certain guys. And I was like, well, watch this. Just watch this match. And so we watch a match. And then we go back to like the beginning, and we watch another one. And then we watch another one. And and the next thing I know, it's like in the morning. And my 6-year-old and I are awake. We're both in our underwear on the couch. And we were watching some old school wrestling and having the best time ever. All because of Post to Post. He's going to be a mess today, and I was late.
That's a great reason, though, for sure.
I love the WWE Network for that reason. Any match you want to see, go watch it. Any pay-per-view, go ahead and find it.
So the reason I assume you guys are talking a lot about your favorite feuds is because that was the big question that we're going to utilize to find a winner for today's Raw tickets. It's our very last pair of WWE Raw tickets for the Ford Center, June 19th here in Evansville. And I do have the winner's name right here.
Awesome. Let's hear it. Who's going to Raw courtesy of Post to Post?
So again, everyone who submitted a valid answer is qualified. I chose this morning. I would think it was around 9-ish or so. And I've got the name here. It all goes through a random generator. And like I said, it's not just me picking. Anyone who has a valid feud wins. No one had an invalid feud. No one had more than one entry. So I think we're good to go. And the winner is right here in my hand, Jer. Should I spill the beans?
Spill the beans!
The winner is La La Land. I don't deserve that, but thank you.
I liked it because I didn't expect it. I didn't see it coming.
The machine randomly chose Melissa Wendell West.
Congratulations, Melissa.
Congratulations, Melissa. Thank you.
What was her feud? May I ask what feud she chose?
Yeah, by the way, before we get to that, Melissa, another name I'm not familiar with. So thanks for watching Post to Post. I hope that you're a regular viewer, and I hope that you'll continue to be a regular viewer. I forget the Crystal one last week's, and even though she doesn't do the whole Post to Post post show thing, she says she watches all the time, and she shared it last week. And thanks for watching, Crystal. Hoping Melissa's got the same kind of story. But even if you just stopped by once, we thank you for watching it. And I will message you shortly with some details about how you can pick up your Raw tickets. Like I said, you got to pick those up tomorrow, or tomorrow being Friday, or Monday, the day of the show, at our radio station. But I'll get you the details here in a little bit. Her feud that she submitted is, of course, a great one, and I believe one that will come up several times on the course of the show today when we read back all the comments. She liked Stone Cold Steve Austin taking on The Rock.
Oh, that's good. That was, I mean, two of the best going at it. That's a great feud.
When you think about the Attitude Era, which is without a doubt, at least in my opinion, the highlight of wrestling, like that is the best time of wrestling. They were the two biggest faces of the time, and they squared off several times. I mean, they main evented, was it 3 WrestleManias together?
Yeah, I mean, they were both huge draws in and of themselves. It's very rare that you have like the face of wrestling time active with of wrestling. Like there were two. It was like having 2 Hulk Hogans at the same time.
Yeah, it absolutely, if not bigger, you know. So not only that, they wrestled so many times. They wrestled every time they touched, it was a big deal for sure.
And it was, I mean, in the beginning, it was, you know, with the Smoking Skull belt, and I mean, it was hot there for a while. Those two, that was a great feud, and that kind of bled into, you know, the other big feud with Stone Cold that I'm sure we're going to hear about at some point today.
Oh yeah, because we're definitely going to be talking about that one. I assume I know which one you're talking about. Should we talk about, before we get to some of the listener comments, to get to some of our favorite feuds?
Yeah, we could definitely start. You and me could start today. Do you want me to go first, or would you like to?
By all means, go right ahead. Or here, well, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so for me, there are a lot of feuds that meant a lot to me at different times, and I eventually settled on one. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention. Immediately thought of, as a kid, I loved Rick Rude. I just did. One of my favorite matches of all time is their steel cage match at SummerSlam. And I like that, but that's not the best feud ever.
Here, it brings up a little bit. I heard Rick Rude. Who are you talking? Who in Rick Rude?
Rick Rude and the Ultimate Warrior. I always thought was a fun feud for me as a kid because I just loved the Ultimate Warrior.
Sure.
But if you're gonna pick a Rick Rude feud, it would be the Roberts feud. Would be one of the best ever. And for me, Jake the Snake Roberts' best feud, but was against the Macho Man Randy Savage. So that's where my brain was for a little while. I was like, just absolutely loving, like, thinking about those feuds as a kid. That's when I really believed it 100%. And I was totally into it. But for me, the best feud I thought of all time was Mankind and the Undertaker. It was the first time the Undertaker finally meets somebody that is just as mentally deranged. You have the Paul Bearer swerve, and I'm not just saying this because of the Hell in the Cell in 98. You know, the feud starts way back in 96. But what I loved about it, and I was watching it with Evan, and this is where we all got caught up, some of the coolest matches that I can remember was because of this feud. The Boiler Room Brawl at SummerSlam, the Buried Alive match at that one In Your House, countless Raws where they were just killing each other, coming out from the ring, and you know how much I love Mick Foley and the faces of Foley. It's funny, the Hell in the Cell match that I was present for is the most famous of their matches, but it was like 2 years after their feud was actually hot. Their feud was crazy in 96.
The match that they're most associated with is probably that Hell in the Cell. But when I think of their feud, I do go back to like the Boiler Room Brawl 96, 97 before I think of that 98 Hell in the Cell.
And what blew my son's mind, because he wasn't around for it, so he wouldn't realize that at one point in time, this one wrestler was pretty high on the card. So when Mankind really goes after the Undertaker, it's in a casket match, and the Undertaker's fighting someone else in a casket match, and Mankind ends up being in the casket at the end, and there are all the magic tricks, you know. Who the Undertaker was fighting, which I thought was hilarious, at In Your House 96, fighting Goldust in a casket match in the main event.
Yeah.
Goldust in the main event. I forgot all about that.
Yeah, he had a nice little thing going on around that time too. He was always pretty high up on the card, at least the way I remember it. So yeah, dude, that's a great choice.
I think that's my favorite feud. I think some people for Undertaker would say that the Shawn Michaels feud was better, and I think some people would pick other feuds over that one. But for me personally, that's my favorite feud.
Yeah, I don't know. The Shawn Michaels thing, maybe. I think people might say Mankind before Shawn Michaels with Undertaker, but with Undertaker, I go Kane first.
Okay. I mean, I get that, the brothers, and that was a giant feud, but for me, I think that was Mankind's best feud. As Mankind, anyways. I think
All right,
corporate Mankind was funny.
You want to hear some of mine?
Yeah, well, I feel like I've got yours pegged, but go for it.
I'm curious. Okay, do you want to go ahead and well?
No, but I'll be honest, and if you say it, I'll say if I thought I'd hate to make the announcement for you.
I have my answer, and then I have kind of like a sub answer, and then I have like what I feel is the right answer. So I'm going to start with my answer, and I'm answering the question because I feel like there's two ways you can kind of answer this question. A feud that plays out on television and is written and created and resulted in wrestling matches. I'm going with the feud that easily made me a wrestling fan. You could say that one feud specifically got me hooked on wrestling. The very first show I watched ever, not even as a wrestling fan, but the very first wrestling show I ever saw when one of my friends wanted to see a pay-per-view and I was around for it, was SummerSlam 94. I think the post regulars know that. Two big matches from that night. The main event was Undertaker versus Undertaker, which was interesting for someone who doesn't understand what they're watching at the time.
Right.
And sorry, one of my dogs.
What a great introduction to what pro wrestling is.
Yeah,
Undertaker versus Undertaker.
But especially in the mid '90s, it is a good introduction. And my dog is freaking out. I might have to let her out.
That's funny.
Nevertheless, I apologize for that. The match before that, though, and what really hooked me was the man who'd go on to be my favorite wrestler ever, the Hitman Bret Hart. Got the shirt back on again today. Because I just love Bret. His feud with his brother Owen. All their matches were great. I loved the angle because this was like a real feud that I was watching when I didn't know that wrestling was fake, and I believed it. I couldn't believe that they go home to the same house at Thanksgiving, that they hate each other, and when I learned more about the feud before SummerSlam of '94, like the way Owen turned on Bret and was living in the shadow and always felt overshadowed by Bret, I can't explain why outside of the fact that it's what made me a wrestling fan. It's what made me a fan of wrestling. And so SummerSlam actually took place in '94 on a Monday night. And I asked my friend, I'm like, how do I keep watching this? What do I do? How do I keep watching? And he said on Monday nights on USA, you watch Raw. So the next Monday, I tuned into Raw because I had to see what was going on with the Hart family.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history. Now, that's my favorite feud that took place in a writing room that people planned out and had wrestling matches. I think it's also very legit to say that the best feud in the history of wrestling was the very real feud that existed between WWF and WCW.
Well, yeah. I mean, if we're going to go that far, there's nothing bigger than that.
Yeah. So, but that, I don't know how you want to call that because it's not a feud in the traditional sense, being, it wasn't, it didn't have a match. I mean, don't even give me the invasion stuff. There wasn't a specific match, but it was real. And in that respect, it makes it different. So it depends on which way you want to go there. And then I also have what I feel like is the right answer. And the best way I can compare this is, for me personally, my favorite band of all time is Guns N' Roses. I understand they are not the greatest band of all time. The Rolling Stone magazine would never put them as the greatest band ever. There might be a few people in contention. You hear the Beatles quite a bit. People might talk about the Stones. Some people might say Michael Jackson.
Zeppelin.
Yeah, like those are the names that you hear. So in that respect, I'm going to call this in like a Rolling Stone magazine kind of way. I do believe the best feud in the same way the Beatles are the greatest band ever, the greatest feud ever is Stone Cold Steve Austin and Vince McMahon.
I agree 100%. And that's why I asked when we did this question, are we talking our favorite or the best? Because the number one best feud of all time, what you just said, it is Stone Cold and Vince McMahon, but it wasn't my favorite. It wasn't my favorite, right. But it was a great feud. And it was
I don't want to downplay it like I didn't like it. It resulted in amazing television, a handful of matches that you could watch. I'll call them watchable. Like their Valentine's Day Massacre match was good, but a lot of their matches are pretty ugly. And
yeah, well, kudos to Vince McMahon, because whoever thought he would be in matches that were great.
Yeah. So and then it's just like that's what, in my opinion, turned the tide for WWF to win the ratings war, to still be around as a company. I mean, you could very logically say it's possible WWE wouldn't be around today without that feud.
What's interesting to me is, and I was wrong because I thought I had your favorite feud. I had that wrong.
Well, what do you think it was?
Interesting is, where did Vince McMahon Stone Cold come from? It came from Vince McMahon turning into heel Vince McMahon. And on television, where did heel Vince McMahon come from? It came from the Montreal Screwjob, which was a result of what I thought you were going to say was the best feud. I thought you were going to say Bret and Shawn.
Bret and Shawn, boy, this is sad again. I've been looking high and low for this notebook. I know the notebook I'm looking for, but sadly I cannot locate it. And I'm moving here in a little bit, so I will hopefully be able to find the notebook in a little bit. But in that notebook is a list of, there's a lot of things written in the notebook. Two of those things are a list of my top 20 favorite finishing moves, which we talked about last week. And there's also a list of my top 20 favorite feuds in the history of wrestling. I don't remember where Bret and Shawn fall, but I can tell you another one that's definitely higher than that I'm assuming people are going to be talking about here in a little bit once we go to the viewer comments. If I had to think of a second place, again, a written feud that resulted in matches and stuff and played out on television, would be NWO versus WCW.
In the beginning.
Yeah, that's probably worth saying.
In the beginning, because when everybody was an NWO member, I was out and everybody was out. So yeah, I would agree with that. I also loved, and it's funny because I remember them fighting over the Intercontinental title, and you don't realize you're watching two future Hall of Famers, but The Rock and Triple H I thought was a great feud.
Yeah, I think that may have been my following one. And what I loved about their feud was that it played out over such a long period of time. One of my dogs is being such a butthole. I apologize. She's like,
"It's okay."
Hold on, but here's the feud of Roxy and Layla. And there's the blanket. Go. There's Jerry. That's the blanket you and your family gave me.
Absolutely. Look at them. They're ready to have a boiler room brawl.
We usually pull for Layla. We think Roxy's the heel because Roxy is usually picking these fights. Bless you, Layla. Layla is the baby face, I feel like. So, look at that slobber knocker.
Yeah. This is getting serious. You're going to have to pull them apart.
So, if you and I could keep going on and on and on about the best feuds, do you want to check out some of I'm just going to leave it on these two. It's far more entertaining than my face.
Yeah, just leave it on them and we'll talk wrestling. This is the highlight of my day, watching them fight over a Mario blanket.
Thanks again for that Mario blanket. If you can't tell, I love it.
I'm glad you do. I was really thinking about you when we sent
it. Roxy's got Layla in a reverse choke. All right, so scrolling through some of these comments. Let's see. John Martin wrote, I'll just say John. John wrote, you'd have to say WCW versus WWF in the ratings war. Yeah, we just talked about that. Yep. Nothing has ever brought the best out of a company than competition. Both companies at their height. That's very, very true as far as I'm concerned. I'll just leave it at that. Thanks, John. We just mentioned that. I agree with you. Here's Mike Virgin. We know Mike very well on the post show. A lot to choose from. A lot of big moments. The Rockers with the famous barbershop window. Mega Powers. Okay, that's Hogan and Savage. NWO versus the World. Absolutely. Undertaker and Mankind, which Jerry just talked about. And says it goes on. But he says his number one. Here's a great choice. I think this one's awesome. DX versus the Nation.
Oh, that was fun. That was a fun one, wasn't it?
Yeah, that resulted in some really great segments, some high comedy. I feel like some like real real high bar comedy from like, you know, their in-ring promos. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. When they came out dressed as the Nation, that was great.
Yeah, that's a real one of the best segments from Raw ever kind of moments right there.
And that was another facet in the Triple H Rock feud, you know?
Absolutely, without a doubt, without a doubt. Benny, Benny's another guy we recognize. Hope not too late to contribute, never too late. But my favorite feud of all time. Oh man, great choice. Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio.
I get that, but weren't they responsible for one of the most ridiculous matches ever? The most ridiculous gimmicks ever?
Well, there was I call it Dominic on a pole. It was the right to a person. What was on a ladder match.
Dominic on a pole.
But okay, so one of the in fact, I know Gavin, who works with me, his favorite match of all time is their Halloween Havoc match. And I know I showed it to you. I don't know how well you remember it, but that's a serious contender for best match of all time.
Yeah.
So thanks, Benny, for that.
All time, though. That's saying something.
It's up there. It's not my number one, but if you watch it, I mean, it's perfection. It's embodied in that entire match.
By the way, I asked my son what his favorite feud was at 6 years old, and he said John Cena.
But what's John Cena's best feud?
Would you say Randy Orton? Some people would say Orton, I think.
Yeah, maybe Edge. There's a lot of good stuff in there. Chase writes, AJ Lee's Crazy Angle is the one that sticks out. Okay, I mean, I wouldn't say it was one of the best, but of the modern era, that was a fun feud to watch play out, I think. Well, you weren't really watching, I don't think, when AJ was doing the love triangle stuff. You may have been making a good choice. Jerry's shaking his head no. It's doing the auto-produced thing where whoever's talking it tends to focus on. Okay, Jennifer writes, I'm going to go with CM Punk and John Cena. I can get with that. I mean, not for greatest ever, in my opinion, but that was a great feud. She writes that it was a great feud that empowered Punk to his greatest heel run. Runner-up is Stone Cold and McMahon because, oh, hell yeah. Sure.
Now, when we talk about, a few times we've talked about wrestling where I just wasn't watching. I just wasn't watching anymore. And unfortunately, and I've got to go back at some point and see it because that was the CM Punk years. I met CM Punk at a show here at the Bryce Jordan Center, but I wasn't really watching wrestling at the time. So I know about the pipe bomb. I've seen that. I've seen that promo, and I get it, but I don't know who he feuded with. And everyone's always talking about CM Punk, like going crazy about him. I've never really seen the man work that much.
In that time, he did not have bad matches, man. He did not have bad matches.
But was his big feud against John Cena or Triple H? I always assumed it was Triple H.
I'd probably say Cena before Triple H, but I don't know. I guess I don't associate him with just one feud, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
Daniel, I'm sorry, I skipped Josh. My all-time favorite was the one that changed my life. The Mega Powers Explode. I feel like there's a certain age group that's just a smidge older than me. I don't know how old Josh is, but the people, I mean, even probably your age, Jer, that was their feud. Like that was the feud of their childhood. If it wasn't Hogan Warrior, it was Hogan Savage.
Well, that's because they were going after Miss Elizabeth. I mean, it all started with the Macho Man wedding. That's the one that had Jake the Snake Roberts in it. Yeah, I'm telling you, like, it doesn't resonate with you. It's just a little past you, but it's my age and a little older. When you grew up in the 80s rock and wrestling, Vince McMahon was really taking off, and you had the WWF ice cream bars, and the cartoons were on. Past WrestleMania 3, like we're talking WrestleMania 5 and up, they're really starting to get. That's when you're getting into answers like this, and that's why I think like Rick Rude and Jake the Snake Roberts, that was a great feud. Jake Roberts and Macho Man, that was awesome. Ultimate Warrior and Hogan. people don't really talk about those anymore because the Attitude Era was so much better. It just was so much better from all aspects, the wrestling, everything. You know, you look at the biggest stars of the 80s and compare them to the biggest stars of the 90s, and while they were just as cartoon-like and larger than life, none of them could wrestle worth a lick.
So yeah, there were that is, I will say this about that feud. I do think it was fantastic, and I just missed that method of telling a story, of taking 1 year and having a story play out over a year and letting little things just feed us little bites, week by week, not even every week, just week by week, give us little things. Then you've got the big things like Saturday night's main event with the Elizabeth getting hurt and all that stuff, and you know, just the way it played out was just fantastic.
Perfect.
Daniel writes, guess one of my all-time favorites was DX versus the McMahons. Okay, that was definitely my heyday. I would still pick the Nation probably over the McMahons, but the McMahons were great heels for DX. And also Austin McMahon. Everyone's saying Austin McMahon because Austin McMahon is the right answer.
Yeah.
Jeremy writes, did not expect this. Jeremy, I agree with you 100%. Guess my all-time would have to be Owen Hart versus Bret Hart at WrestleMania 10 and SummerSlam 94. Both them steal show, both matches, and it felt real. It was real life brothers fighting. That was one thing. It did feel real to me. That was important, I guess, to hooking me. Jeremy, you and I agree 100%. I did not expect anyone to write that, but I'm happy that somebody did. So, Rebecca,
I wish I liked Owen Hart more.
I know you're not a big fan.
We're not going to argue about him today, but I wish I could see what you guys saw with Owen Hart.
Rebecca says, I have to agree with Daniel about Stone Cold versus McMahon. Also love Undertaker versus Kane or Undertaker versus Triple H. Okay, interesting. Well, you know, I would be interested to see a fan-wide poll of like every wrestling fan who they attribute the Undertaker's biggest feud with, because there's a lot of people who could stand up to that, I think.
Well, I bet today's fan would say Brock Lesnar because it's the most recent.
Nate says, well, look at this. Undertaker and Kane. Always loved that storyline as a kid. See, everyone's saying Kane. Kane, I think, was a very good opponent for Undertaker. Remember, they were brothers.
For me, I like the Mankind story better, and they produced better matches. And so that's why I go with that one.
Sure. And then I believe Undertaker and Kane, I think, also wrestled at WrestleMania, I want to say 3 times. You had 14. You had 20. And I got to be missing one. I feel like there's another one in there that I'm not thinking of. Either way, I'm going to keep on going. Jason. Oh, great. Brian Pillman and Stone Cold Steve Austin. The segment at Pillman's house was intense. That's a great choice.
What did he say?
He said Brian Pillman and Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Oh, what I remember from that the most is breaking into Pillman's house.
Yeah, he was saying the house specifically was the highlight, and I agree.
It was good.
We did Melissa. She was the winner. Joseph writes, we mentioned this earlier, Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. I feel the true dislike for each other added to the feud. Yeah, I do think that one becomes more interesting the more inside you become to wrestling, the more you learn about real wrestling stories, the more you're going to enjoy a Bret Hart-Shawn Michaels feud. Look at this. Sean, great answer. Razor Ramon and the 1-2-3 Kid. Jerry and I use this as an example of great storytelling.
Yeah, that is, over Christmas we were watching the Raws from that time, and that really is the best way to tell a story. A little bit, we just said it, take a piece, make you want it, but it's always a little different. It's not like what they're doing with Enzo and Cass where it's the same thing every week.
Tabitha takes a similar approach. Edge and Matt Hardy, because it was real life when Lita and Edge, when Lita cheated on Matt with Edge.
Edge speared Lita.
You loved that feud, I remember. I remember that was kind of getting you back into wrestling.
It was. I loved that feud, and I hated how they handled it because they brought Matt Hardy back just to squish him.
Chastity writes Stone Cold versus Vince McMahon. Brian, another one for HBK versus Bret Hart. Selena writes Austin McMahon and WCW versus WWE. Those are great answers. We mentioned all those. Vanessa says Stone Cold and The Rock. Talked about that. Austin McMahon again from Nicholas. I want to say Nubsy. Nubsy writes Seth Rollins versus Triple H. Pretty modern one. I think that, it's got potential to be a pretty great feud, but to me, it hasn't gripped me the way some of the other feuds that we've talked about have.
Nobody's mentioned Gangrel versus Val Venus.
We've got a few more here. Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. I mean, you know what? If you're a fan of, I was going to say if you've been watching wrestling for 2 years, that's a good answer. But now that I think about it, if you've been following the independents, that's a great answer too. And you go back to NXT and you put in all the modern stuff. Yeah, that's a really valid answer. Brittany is another vote for Stone Cold McMahon. Oh, you know what? Jackie, this will be the last comment we'll talk about. Jackie has the one that we haven't talked about yet too. We've certainly talked about both these people enough. And the highlight of this is another match of all time contender too. She writes Austin versus Bret Hart.
I'll always remember the blood dripping off of Stone Cold's head as he's in the sharpshooter.
Sure.
I mean, that's the image everyone has from that feud. That was a great feud, right?
If you put the letter S in front of Hitman, you got my exact thoughts on him or something like that. I screwed it up, but there was some great stuff. What I loved about that was Bret, he loved Steve and the feeling was mutual. And Bret's goal, just like in his head, was, I want to get this guy over. And he did. And like in that respect, sealed the fate for wrestling as we know it today. I think it's fair to say, I don't know if I lost you. Are you there, Jer? Oh.
I couldn't hear you for a minute, but I got you now.
Okay. I was just saying, I think it's fair to say without this angle, just like Austin McMahon, I feel like it's logical to me that you wouldn't have an Austin McMahon, which without this feud, without Bret getting Austin over so big, and then without Austin McMahon, you don't have wrestling as you know it today.
Absolutely. Well, and a lot of people credit the King of the Ring where he beats Jake the Snake Roberts, and then Stone Cold says 316 says I just whooped your ass, but he was getting over before that. Then he starts to get over even more. Then Bret Hart puts him over the top, and then the screw job, and Vince turns into a total heel, and the rest is history. You're right. Is Stone Cold Vince McMahon.
And, I was just listening to a Bruce Pritchard podcast, learned something interesting about the Austin 316 stuff. So if you remember, Steve Austin became Austin 316 because he won King of the Ring, was not originally scheduled to win that. As we all know, that was supposed to go to Triple H and wound up not happening because of the curtain call. I'm not blowing anyone's mind there. What I did find out was they didn't know what to do with the King of the Ring that year. They had these guys, and Jake Roberts was around when they were talking about it, and Jake says, "You kidding me? You give it to Steve Austin." And Jake was even in that tournament, so Jake was bound and determined to get Austin over just like Bret was. So Steve Austin is a great example of it taking a village, and we should all be pretty thankful, whether you like Steve Austin or not, that he was pretty well liked in the back, because Steve Austin, you could argue he saved the business. Whether you were digging him or not, he did.
Absolutely. But do you find it ironic that Steve Austin, near the end there, with Vince, he was a guy that's been known to refuse to do a job for people. Over, and then it seemed like when it comes time for him to get other people over, Austin was never really on board with that.
To be honest with you, it does bother me, Jer. Guys have their reasons, and it's their line of work. And I'll be honest with you, like there's sometimes, maybe there's an endorsement opportunity being pitched to me, or there's just something in my line of work that I just don't want to do, whether I feel like it devalues my brand or sends a message I don't want to send. It's rare, but there's been a couple of times where I have to put my foot down to protect myself. And as someone who's not in the wrestling business, who am I to say when you're supposed to and when you're not supposed to?
I wouldn't put Brock Lesnar over. Like, that was crazy.
Well, he would tell you that's not exactly the way it happened. He wanted to put Brock over right. And just having Brock beat Austin on a match that wasn't even announced on a Monday Night Raw to qualify for the King of the Ring wasn't what Austin wanted to do with Brock. Would be what Austin would tell you.
Okay.
So
I'm like, at some point, just do a job.
So yeah, but that's the thing. As a rule, I do think you're being paid by someone who to essentially be an actor. You need to do your job at some point too. But I don't want to end on a sour note with Austin because, I mean, he was mentioned how many times in this thing. So I want to thank everybody for entering. Again, this was the bonus episode, and with such a crazy week, Jerry and I are going to bring you predictions on a Friday, baby.
We're doing it again. We're going 4 days this week, so buckle up for predictions.
Yeah, we'll. I have the last letter game tomorrow, Jerry, so we might have to push it back a little bit, but we will make it happen. Predictions tomorrow. For myself, the Rob, my tag team partner, Jerry Valeri, thank you so much for watching, and we will catch you tomorrow.
I'm doing it from the top of a ladder tomorrow.
Valeri, best feud ever.